This is the Pro Perspective from House Pro, where home builders, designers, and industry experts share their views on running a modern firm.
Do you ever think about hitting the reset button for your business? You know things aren't working the way they should, but it's just hard to stop the train. Well, Paul DesRoches and Dave Greksouk of Moss Building and Design did just that. And together we dive into the how and why, plus the results that made it worth the effort. Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's podcast. I'm Liza Hausman, Vice President of Industry Marketing with House. And I'm so excited to welcome today Paul DesRoches and Dave Greksouk, the CEO and the Principal and VP of Moss Building and Design. Paul and Dave have developed a unique team-based model at Moss that has helped deliver a consistent premium experience to their clients. And today we're going to talk about the importance of being able to hit the reset button on how your business works and why taking a step back to evaluate how things are working can really make a difference. So welcome, Paul and Dave.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, I'd love to start, just give folks a little bit of background on, the two of you and the company.
Yeah, sure. So I actually started in construction when I was 8 years old. I went to work for my dad in the summers. He's a carpenter. When I went to college, after I graduated from college, I kind of went on a different path. Met the founder of this business when I moved into his neighborhood in 2008. Was getting my MBA at the time and wanted to do something different. And so I joined Moss in 2012 as the chief operating officer. And in 2020, moved into the CEO role when the founders decided they wanted to move on and retire. So yeah, Moss has been around since 2001. And, sort of the original founding idea was that, the company was named after one of the founders, Pete and Jason, who are father and son. Pete's father, his name was Paul, and his nickname was Moss. And so they named the company after Paul. And the reason being is that, he sort of espoused all of the values that they wanted the company to be run on. He worked for the phone company for 40 years. And then when he retired, he was the handyman around the neighborhood, just taking care of all the people. And so Moss was really founded on the idea that we would really take good care of our employees and take care of our people. And then therefore they would then take care of the customer. That's the basis of it. And we're a DC metro firm. So we're headquartered in Northern Virginia, and we serve DC, Maryland, and Virginia, with the bulk of our business being in Virginia.
I love the community aspect of that story, by the way. I think it really is just such a nice example of, that philosophy of taking care of the people that are around you and helping them. Kind of a nice founding story. Dave, I guess, how did the two of you meet, or how did you end up working together in this business?
Sure. So I started in the remodeling construction business in 2001 with a regional mid-Atlantic kitchen and bath company that my dad was CFO and partner of. And I was coming from kind of a tech wide area network back in the day, long distance telecom industry. And I started with them in their dealer network and eventually worked my way out to the retail branches and supported a variety of different teams and functions there. And I was there for quite a bit of time. I mean, almost 10 years. And from there, I went to a national window manufacturer, supplier. And then it was there where I met Jason, Pete, and Paul. Through just conversations, we turned out to be a good fit. So I came on board almost 11 years now as the vice president of sales, trying to do some specific things in that world. And then, as Paul mentioned, in 2020, we had bought the business out and moved into more of a general role here at Moss.
Nice. And can you tell us just a little bit about the types of clients and projects that the company does?
Sure.
Yeah. So about 75% of our revenue comes from additions. So that's our bread and butter, usually additions with master suite and, kitchen addition. And we do a lot of interior remodels, do a lot of just kitchens and some bathrooms and some basements. And as you can see, we have a beautiful basement behind us. That was one of our projects that we've done. The types of customers that Moss serves, we're in the DC metro area. I've heard this said to me, and I don't know if it's true, so don't fact check me on this one, but That is the highest percentage of type A personalities in any metro area ever. Maybe every metro area says that, but in the DC market for sure, that's the case. I think this is a fact. 60% of the people that live in Northern Virginia, being Fairfax and Loudoun, have master's degrees, which is a very high percentage, obviously. So that, our customers are people that run big government contracting firms, attorneys, all the rest. And so, we're typically looking at people that have a pretty high income. They have a lot of equity in their house. I think the average home sale in Fairfax County, which is in Arlington County, is probably close to $1 million, average single family home value. So we're looking at customers that are very sophisticated buyers, very sophisticated people, and they're looking for a sophisticated, turnkey experience. That's really what we're trying to provide for them. We're a full service design build firm. We have project designers, project architects, project developers, and project managers all on staff, as well as project craftsmen that work in the field. So the client base is, we're not working for the Bill Gates of the world, but we're also working for a very sophisticated customer.
Makes sense. And I spent a summer in DC. I remember that it's a pretty intense town, and makes sense that that's the clientele. And it's interesting because you talk about who's on the team. I think, for folks serving customers like that, there's probably consistency, firm to firm about the types of roles that they have on the team. But I think what's, unique that you guys have done is really thought about, serving the customer, not just from a process or, some of the obvious touch points, but really kind of all the way down to how you've organized your people and teams and processes. So maybe share a little bit about how the company is currently organized, and then we can get into how you got there and why.
Sure. Yeah, I think, like you said, the sort of typical organizational structure, which would be called functional, is where you have, salespeople, which we call project developers, you have architects and designers, and you have project managers, and sort of the baton gets passed between the different departments, and with a real focus on execution and optimization within inside of those departments. But what we've done is we've kind of flipped it on its side and said that what we're most interested in is not necessarily functional optimization. We're most interested in project optimization and the customer experience. So we're organized by project team. And so each team is like a little remodeling business where there's a project developer, traditionally called a salesperson, an architect, a project designer, and a senior project manager with other project managers reporting to that person. So each team is responsible for a geographic area within inside of our market, and they operate somewhat as autonomous business units within inside of the company. And, but they do operate within a consistent, with a consistent process sort of across the organization.
How does it work differently than a functional model? So maybe just compare and contrast a little bit to, how things work in a functional model versus this, project-based team.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think at its most basic level, it's probably easy for everybody to understand that the sales organization is sort of its own function. And within inside of a sales organization, traditionally, you have a pretty big disparity amongst performance within inside of that organization. You'll have your top guns, your high performers, and you'll have your people that are, new or, sort of at the lower end of performance. And so what'll end up happening is, your top gun salespeople end up selling the majority of your projects. And then that project would be then passed to the architect and design field. And depending upon, sort of their backlog and their existing workload, or maybe who might be good doing that sort of a project, then that person, that architect and that designer might be tasked with that project. And then kind of the same thing along with the project management role. So what that creates is, it obviously creates high performance within inside of certain functions, but it creates, a little bit of a disconnect. I think people tend to overlook what's called transaction cost, which is the cost of transferring the information and the project between the functions. And, if you got a salesperson that has sold a ton of projects, right? And they've got a ton of projects that are being flowed through the system. They are focusing on selling new projects. They may not be as available to help the architect or designer or the project team downstream. And so what a team organization does, this is a little bit different, is each salesperson / project developer is accountable for a certain amount of sales that flow through that organization. And it's much more balanced in terms of what they sell and how much they sell. And the reason we're able to achieve that is through the fact that the team is working in unison to help that project developer sell that project. And that flows down through the entire organization. So a good example of that is, you have a project that, say, a new salesperson comes into your organization. They have a project that is maybe a little bit more challenging of a project for them to sell. Say it's like a large addition with an interior model, very complex to try to figure out what the right project is for the customer. Well, we have our team will get involved in that sale, and they'll get involved in helping that project developer, that salesperson, create and identify what is the right most value added project for the customer. And that allows new, less experienced salespeople to come in and start selling larger projects. It also prevents errors from happening, right? If you have a newer salesperson who may not be as comfortable with providing, being able to estimate or being able to write the contract, they can make mistakes or in that early phase, even if they are able to sell it, and those mistakes will then be transferred downstream. So, that's a simple example at the start of the project, but it extends back into the architecture and design, where the project manager and the salesperson are getting involved and ensuring that project vision, the vision that the customer had for the project, is being designed and architected, and that we're staying on budget or we're expanding the budget per the customer's request. And the same thing happens downstream. So you're really talking about sort of a highly collaborative environment where they're all kind of focused on executing on the customer vision.
Right. And in the team-based approach, the project developer, sales, pre-sale, is very interested in setting the project up for success. And that's, we can talk about what that means in the team environment, because they're seeing the project through design and even into parts of construction. And if there's a mistake made in setting the project up for success in the contract, they are involved with interacting with the customer and helping to resolve the issue. Whereas in a functional environment, there's more of a premium put on making the sale and passing it off and kind of letting the other functions clean up the mess, if you will. It's not always like that, but it does happen. Yep. So you can see, why somebody would be more interested in setting the project up for success in a team-based environment than in a functional environment. And that happens regularly throughout the project, even into construction sometimes.
I'm sure these are things that our listeners run into, right? And I've had countless conversations where it's that handoff, right? Somebody's handing off an enormous amount of information to the team that's handling the next phase, and that's always a stressful process, because it is, it's a place where things can go wrong, data's lost, etc. Because you were organized functionally previously, what wasn't working that caused you to rethink things? Was it sort of a really obvious trigger, or did it build up over time? Did you kind of take a step back and have a conversation about it? How did this come about?
So it's a couple of things that sort of led us to think about this. First, when I first came into the organization, when Dave first came into the organization, the bulk of the sales were being done by the founders, and the company was organized functionally. And so, we kind of saw some of the challenges that was associated with that model. Obviously, the things that you're talking about as well. And we saw that, that there was sort of an inconsistent customer experience sort of across the organization. Different the ownership was tasked with selling different types of projects. So you had some owners that were basically purely selling additions. You had an owner that was purely selling kitchens and baths. And so one of the things that the vision for the company that Jason and Pete had when I was brought on board is they really wanted to scale and grow the company. And one of the things that we had to be able to do was we had to be able to get people on board that could sell projects, but we also knew that there was a disconnected customer experience but through observation when I first got on board as to the model. And so, this is one of the first things that I did was at the company level was to reorganize us into this team model. Initially, we reorganized into a team model that kind of aligned with the existing structure. So we had a team model that was an additions team. We had a team model that was a kitchens, bath, and basements team. And then we had a home services team. And that sort of helped with the ability to transfer the information and have the team act more cohesively, but we still had a disconnected customer experience. And the geography that we're working in is pretty large. So we would have salespeople, project managers, designers, sometimes driving an hour between meetings, trying to cover the territory that they were going on. And we would also have a customer that would, buy an addition from us. And then a couple of years later, they would buy a basement from us. And then a couple of years later, they would do a home services project. And each one of those experiences was a little different. And the customers, we knew from talking to them, they got attached to the team that they were working with. They really wanted to continue to work with that team. I think probably many of the people that are going to be listening to this identify with this. The people that are in their home, they become very close to. They see them every single day. Those people are taking care of their pets. They're taking care of their kids. They're taking the trash out when required. They're bringing the mail in, and they become kind of part of the family. And so when that person goes away, I know we've had customers tell us many times that they're going to miss this person. And then they do the next project, they were hoping that person's coming back. And obviously that person's not coming back. So, we reorganized really around the second reorganization was around the customer. And we could have picked, customer whose last name starts with the letter A through the letter G is this team, and then go on and break it up like that. But we decided to do it geographically because that would optimize our workflow as well, so that when people are out there visiting customers, visiting homes, going between job sites when we're active construction, people aren't driving an hour between jobs. So that was the progression of the organization, and we've subsequently kind of since then have tweaked that model. I'll let Dave chime in on a couple other things there. I know he wanted to say something earlier.
I mean, the cultural element comes to mind as well. I think that, for Paul and I, that was definitely an inflection point way back when is, when you have ownership selling 80+% of the business and the organization set up around supporting them, it doesn't create much opportunity for the rest of the folks. So the team-based model helps to draw away from that. And whether it's ownership or whether it's, a top performer who's selling, a vast majority of the business, it can have a cultural impact in ways that maybe are not seen to the naked eye, because you want to create opportunity for folks. You want to have steps and advancement for folks. And, in the team-based approach, you also want to sort of shift so that is a team of peers, and within the functions on the team, there's not somebody who is necessarily leading that team per se. It's more of like the general management or kind of the management above that. So I think the cultural element originally is kind of what strikes me as a big gain, and then also trying to shift so that the performance within these teams are consistent. So I mean, I can't remember if Paul mentioned this or not, but we have 4 teams that are around a $5 million remodeling business. So each team is performing to about $4 million in revenue and $5 million in sales. And they're tasked with working with their team for those sort of production points. And we're managing behind the scenes, the lead generation, the volume, how to kind of tweak it to make sure that it's as consistent as possible. And that creates a lot of cohesiveness amongst the team, and it reduces the disparity of having, like, that 80-20 rule, where in a functional environment you have 5 salespeople and one of them's doing more than half of the business, and you keep churning over, and it's hard for those newer salespeople or even project managers or designers to kind of get established. In this case, it's already kind of prefabricated, if you will. Like, somebody is joining a team where they're responsible for the business within that geography that's around that 4 million in revenue and 5 million in revenue. So it's a better feel amongst the team members, everything kind of out in the open. And what we do to nurture and recruit that is another element as well. And it's taken kind of a long time to get there, but circle back to just the cultural advantage and the elements and the ability to be able to promote and move people throughout the organization is a huge benefit for sure.
Interesting. So maybe we could drill a little bit more into what the biggest benefits you've seen of shifting to this model are. It sounds like this sort of consistency of team performance is one of them, right? Where you don't have kind of one couple outperformers and then a bunch of laggards, because there's a smaller number, I guess, of each role on each team, and so they're responsible and have to be supported. So maybe tell me a little bit more about what you've seen in different parts of the organization or on the customer as the biggest benefits you've seen from this change.
Yeah, I think from the customer standpoint, you have consistency in the execution of the work. And one of the things that pet peeves me as a customer, and I'm sure does other people as well, is having to basically relay the same information over and over and over again to another people. So it's like, hey, I've already told you this, why do I need to tell you this again? And now I'm telling you this for the third or fourth time. I mean, obviously that's not a zero. That doesn't happen here 100% of the time. We don't perfectly execute and transfer information, but the fact that the team is working sort of collaboratively throughout the process, people, the customer's vision is always at the forefront of what they're working through. And so that consistency in information transfer, the consistency in what the customer is trying to do, because everybody has a little bit of a different perspective they can put on it, including the people that are executing the work in the field. I mean, if they really understand the customer's vision, we give them some autonomy to discuss certain things inside of the project that will ultimately, try to implement their vision, right? And because, as we know in remodeling, now once the project's happening, not everything is going to be laid out perfectly from the design phase, right? There's going to be some nuances and certain tie-ins and certain other elements in the house, and you got to be able to navigate around those. So I think that's one of the biggest benefit from the customer experience standpoint. Dave talked a lot about the cultural standpoint, which I think you can't really underestimate that. If you're in an organization where there's a series of top performers and there's a series of low performers, you're going to create a little bit of a cultural divide inside of the organization, and that's going to extend, and you're going to have issues with that kind of downstream. And we've talked to other design build firms that around the country that have this issue, and they're trying to help, try to figure out how to resolve that. And I think our model, which I wouldn't call it plug and play, it's not quite that clean, but the ability for us to take people, new salespeople, new project managers, plug them into the system, new architects, plug them into the system, and bring them up to speed fast, allows us to scale and grow the org, and allows for the team, as Dave said, to be all on board with kind of what's happening. It's very, there's no kind of secret behind, what's happening inside of the sales team or what's happening inside of the architect team. And, that creates a lot of transparency and in terms of what the employees perceive to be happening, in the organization, which I know, is an issue that everybody suffers with, right? Like,
Right.
especially around compensation and, special treatment of people and those sorts of things.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
super interesting. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
well, go ahead if you can ask a follow-up.
No, I was just a little bit of a follow-up, but it more of a comment that it's interesting that, right, you've created a culture where everyone can succeed. It isn't that sort of competitive situation where, right, someone has to outperform somebody else. The way that you've organized it, you kind of set everybody up, I guess, for, in some ways, for more opportunity, right? Everyone's kind of got that equal
For sure.
opportunity to succeed. And I'm interested in knowing if, do folks feel, you mentioned the sort of autonomy to make changes happen. Do you see kind of greater job satisfaction with that
Yeah, I was
autonomy?
gonna mention that before. And the competition is created, amongst the teams and amongst the company at large. But you're right, within that unit, I mean, they're relying and trusting on each other. And I was gonna say that the team members seem to love it. I mean, they want to pass the project off to people that they're comfortable working with and that they trust. And we spent a lot of time developing the teams and their relationship with one another. And I think you get a higher level of ownership amongst that team just on the success of the project and the customer experience um, uh, at large. So that's a big advantage for sure. We also, I mean, I don't want to say against other firms, but we get them involved in some consequential decision-making things from a company perspective. Like in the recruiting process, if we're hiring a new member for a team, one of the steps in the recruiting process is for them to have a social hour with the team to meet. So the person we're interviewing or recruiting can actually meet the team that they're going to be on, and vice versa. And we've taken their suggestions on a number of occasions on moving forward or not moving forward with somebody based off of the fit of the person and the team. So that's a good feeling, right? If you're a teammate and you kind of have some say over who's joining my team, I mean, that can be powerful.
It feels like it's in some ways a healthier competition, because you feel like team competition, right? Competition between teams. You've got your crew with you. That's a different feeling than I'm an individual, right? Competing against these other individuals. You still kind of have that support and feel like you've got a support network to succeed, in that team competition.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely.
Any other big benefits? I think one of the things you sort of mentioned to me before was sort of, I guess, reducing some of the risk at the project level. And I guess maybe that's...
Yeah, for sure. So, like I think I had mentioned this earlier, right? You might have an inexperienced salesperson who comes across a very large project that has some complexity to it. And, the risk there is sort of multifold, right? I mean, the obviously you might not win the project. You might win the project and it might be the wrong project, for the customer. And you might win the project for the right project for the customer, and you might have made some mistakes along the way, either in the contract or in the estimate. And so, those things, that was another thing that we saw, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was another thing that we saw in the functional side of things. And Dave and I got clued into this. I guess this was pretty early on, but maybe a couple of years into our tenure, we had a couple of customers where it looked on the surface like the execution was perfect, right? Like everything happened and went, but the customer was not happy. And it was sort of a shock that they weren't happy. So Dave and I conducted a little customer experience project where we would go out and personally talk to these customers, and we started to find a thread where the execution was perfect, but we missed the customer's vision for the project. And even nuanced little details, like, if you're putting in a basement as an example, and your plan is to play pool in the basement, right? You don't want to post supporting a beam in your basement where you're not going to be able to get your pool cue back. It's going to interfere with your pool cue. So it's things like that crept into us to say, well, how are we missing the vision? Like, how is this happening? Like, we feel like we're getting it, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. Well, what we were finding was that, once we sort of had locked in the early phases of the contract through the sales process, that we really didn't have an establishment. Our processes and our structure didn't allow us to sort of craft and create and move sort of beyond or dial into what the customer's vision was. So, and it's very easy to do. Like, it's actually very easy to miss it. It's a lot easier than I think people think. And so a variety of things came out of that. We introduced actually a process, changed the organization slightly at the time, and changed some of our sales processes, changed how we engaged the rest of the team to reduce the risk on both missing the customer vision and estimating correctly and getting the contract right. But also introduced some new things, some new technology into our design process, that some virtual reality technology that allowed the customer to actually walk through the space and visualize the space in real time. And I know we're not here to talk about that piece of technology, but that was another big part of it. But that's a
Well,
big
I
risk, I
mean,
think.
so you're probably going here, but like the reduction in fallout is a direct,
Correct.
that's probably
Correct.
where you're going with it, right? Is a direct reflection
Yeah.
on the team satisfaction and the customer satisfaction.
Correct. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it makes sense. Like, adding the visualization tools, right, as part of that process, that makes sense holistically, right? And part of the changing of the structure and process was, right, are the things that allow you to make sure that that vision doesn't fall through the crack.
Yeah,
And
maybe
having those
one more
visual
thing
things
back
there.
on the team that I just came to mind is you have leadership opportunity within the team, even though there isn't a team leader per se, but like everybody has the opportunity to step up and to influence the success of the team. And we've seen that, and we've promoted from folks who have demonstrated that leadership amongst the team and has given us and the organization confidence in promoting somebody and giving that opportunity, which is
Yeah,
good,
that's
right?
actually go ahead, Dave.
No, I was going to say, I mean, typically you're hiring managers or promoting them into something that maybe they've never done before, especially in this industry. So you get a chance to see them operate within the team, lead the team in certain areas, work with the team before you do that. So I think it's a benefit for both the person being promoted and the organization.
No, absolutely, and I think that's a good thing to build on, because I think if people are hearing this, they might think to themselves that we don't have any high performers and we don't have any low performers, and that's not true. We do have high performers, but how does the high performance manifest itself, right? It doesn't manifest itself into a salesperson that sells till $10 million and the next best salesperson selling $1 million. It manifests itself in, as a salesperson who might be excelling, or what we call project development, might be excelling in sales, maybe selling more than the average salesperson, but also providing significant leadership at the team level, ensuring the project, as we know, like we've talked about, the how we're organized and why, right? So that team is thinking about that always. So if you're thinking about, like, what does a high performer look like, and it can come from all different areas, either project management, architecture, design, and we have people that are demonstrating that, is they excel at ensuring the project is optimized throughout the entire project. They excel at helping lead the team through that optimization. So you get just a different level, a different type of a high performer, I guess you could say, in terms of what they're doing.
Interesting. So I love this in the sense of, because we talked a little bit before about, it just seems like there are greater opportunities for more people on the team. Would you say that this structure also gives you kind of a better line of sight or visibility into, people's performance, and being able to, identify those individuals and recognize individuals who are doing well?
Definitely. I mean, definitely. The team they're relying on each other, right? So, and their success is kind of very intimately connected with their teammates. So that they're very vocal about challenges that are being, on their team, and they're very vocal about the successes of their team. We just have recently, I remember just having a conversation with one of our project developers who just was raving about the project architect on his team and just saying, she's amazing. She just does so much. She crushes it. Like, we have these challenging projects with all these special permit situations that require, a longer, more paperwork and more details and all these things. And so, when those people are excelling, and frankly, when they're non-performing, it definitely impacts them, and it's very easy for them to identify, and they know that that team success is either being driven or being inhibited by that team member. So yes, I think that the line of sight into performance, it comes directly from the teammates themselves.
I think Paul mentioned this, but the performance also as it relates to just how the people are doing in general, right? I mean, there's definitely we feel like we hear about that sooner and can do something and can kind of step in and help if there's stress in one particular area. But as it relates to, I mean, really the well-being of the person, right? Which a lot of times you don't have insight into that in a functional environment, or strictly based on performance and numbers, where we spend a lot of time engaging the teams about the health and well-being of the individuals, and that comes out because the teams are naturally protective of their own, right? Which, just kind of reiterating what Paul mentioned, like we'll hear about that, which is part of the performance, right? I mean, somebody who's not, voice isn't being heard, or we're not trying to remove obstacles, or obstacles to help them get their job done, are going to be less likely to enjoy what they're doing.
So that team structure is basically a built-in support network for them as well, which
I think so. Yeah,
definitely.
Like really powerful.
It's a good way to put it.
We probably got folks listening, thinking, okay, this is interesting. Maybe this is a structure that's going to help me grow or scale. I'm sure there were some challenges implementing this along the way. What were some of the difficulties that you had making this transition, and what should people know?
Yeah, I mean, the one of the challenges with this is obviously, as people are thinking, is how do you equalize opportunities sort of across the geographic areas, and how are you making sure that when you have either turnover or growth, how are you managing that? And that's definitely a challenge. There's no doubt. There's no sort of silver bullet here, right? If somebody leaves the team, or we need to add a new team, or we need to rejigger the geographies because we're adding a new team, I mean, all that comes into play, right? There's territories, and people want to make sure that they have a good territory, that they have good opportunities to excel, and all of those things have come into play over the years. And there is really no silver bullet to that. I think one of the things that we've done right now, which we're at the scale that we're able to do this, is we've got this concept of partner teams, and the partner teams are able to, both when people take time off or if there's turnover within inside of that team, provide coverage, for those positions. So, it's not the perfect example, but it does allow for the business continuity to exist amongst those teams. The territory idea is something that I think probably exists everywhere, just probably in a different manner, right? Am I getting the right opportunities? Why do all the best leads go to so and so? So you just need to be cognizant of that, and you need to have very good, what I would say, information systems that allow you to understand the opportunities inside the geographic areas and be able to manipulate those and adjust as required. Of course, when you're doing that, you are obviously changing some of the things, some of the benefits that I talked about earlier with the customer, consistently having that same team over and over again. But again, it's not a perfect world, and you try to mitigate that as much as possible. Try to keep the accounts that are there. Sometimes people will really fight for an account that's outside of their territory because it's a customer that they've done a lot of business with over the years. They want to maintain that, and we've allowed that to happen in a couple of different instances. And I think you just have to take each one of those sort of requests and process them and figure out, is this the right thing to do? Is this not the right thing to do based upon a variety of circumstances? It does, and it does sort of muddle the purity of the water, right? Like we don't have, as I said earlier, we have this geographic area and we're trying to optimize it for production activities and sales activities and design activities. But the reality is, like, there's projects that get sold and the person leaves and then this person takes it, and so it's never pure. So you got to keep that in mind. Is like there are some instances where those things happen, and there are going to be some outliers that exist in your model, and you really just need to be able to account for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would add a couple of things I would add are, you definitely have to shift your recruiting process and focus on candidates who can appreciate and want to operate and know what it means to operate in this type of environment. And as Paul mentioned before, there's a combination of things that make somebody a high performer or successful, not just the raw performance, within their function. And we have spent a lot of time kind of shifting our recruiting strategy process from a variety of different things in order to vet that out, which is, that's moving a bigger boat in the ocean around, kind of takes a while to do. You also have to be comfortable with the numbers. So the teams are based off of us proving out the numbers and performance over a period of time. So we feel comfortable with the size and makeup of the team. I wouldn't do it the opposite way, which is like put the team together, not having the performance proved out. So we spent some time proving out the performance, and we've set the team goals based off of something we're very comfortable with. So, those two things I would definitely keep in mind if you were interested in exploring or testing the model out.
An interesting comment about, recruiting differently or looking for someone that appreciates that environment. Are there any kind of things that sort of stand out in particular that you look for that are indicative?
Well, first is it opens it up widely, because the number of top performers in the design build world are few and far between, and a lot of them have been with their firms for a long time and are the 80%. They're part of the 20% who produces most of the revenue. So the chances of them leaving that organization there's not a great chance of it. So now you're opening up to what we feel is somebody who can reasonably perform within our process and our structure at any function, but that probably has a tendency towards team environment, some leadership capability, and that kind of opens up, that casts a wider net than just somebody being able to perform their function. And a candidate that somebody else may look at strictly for performance or past results, we're opening it up and looking more broadly at their experience and what they could contribute to the organization within the team environment.
Yeah, recruiting is tough for this industry, so anything that can allow you to, go broader makes a lot of sense. It's interesting. I would say, like, one of the threads that I've heard from both of you throughout this conversation is, while there was sort of this leadership change trigger, right, where you guys came in and had the opportunity to rethink the model, you've really been iterating, I think, since that point. So, I'd love to hear just a little bit about, how what your approach is there. Do you make time to kind of step back, because it sounds like, again, these customer stories, or you tried the, different types of project model to organize, after moving and before getting to the team model. So, I guess, how do you start thinking about it, and even these small changes with organizing territories, et cetera? How do you, kind of keep the mindset of iterating, because it's, and not leaving it in a static place?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. I think primarily it's a main topic of conversation at leadership discussions every week. That's the number one thing that we're looking at and talking through, right? Is the team performance, the customer stories, the customer experience. So we're very, very dialed in on, what are the customers experiencing? What are they saying? What are the reviews saying? What is the performance like on the team? How do we need to adjust? Do we need to tweak? How consistently have we been able to produce the same level of results with new hires? And Dave said that before. I think the easiest kind of one to wrap your head around is on the sales and the project development side of things. It's like, it's hard, to say like, oh, I'm going to give a team to, you're going to have one salesperson on that team, and that salesperson's going to ensure that team sells $5 million, right? And like, not a lot of companies would be willing to take that risk. So, but how we've got there is through iterations on the team model, right? It's very hard to do that model right out of the gate, because you don't have the team model that's proven to create that ability to sell consistently at that number, kind of regardless of where you've come from. It is sort of an evolution that you almost have to take, right? If you're looking to transform into this model, like doing what we did right out of the gate probably would not have worked. If we just said, okay, we want to do what we're doing right now, and we're going to implement that 10 years ago, it wouldn't have worked. It would have failed. So you've got to really just keep, as a leadership team, really keep a focus and an eye on how are you ensuring the project efficiency? What does the customer experience look like? What are the opportunities that are being created inside of your team? So if you're looking at like what we talked about, tweaking the geography, so making sure people have opportunities, you got to do that regularly, right? And you need to have information systems that are telling you that. It shouldn't be, I have to spend a month trying to pull this data together. Like, this is something that we look at every single week. We have a system that tells us this is what's happening across these different teams. This is how many discovery calls this team took this week. This is how many discovery teams that last team took. Like, this is what the company took. This is the distribution. Here's the value of these. It's not a management by disconnect, right? It's not like, okay, we're just going to let these kind of remodeling teams kind of run their thing and do their thing and look at the end game, right? We're always looking at the leading indicators. Is this successful the way we thought it was going to be successful? Are these opportunities being distributed? Are the teams performing in the way that we think they're going to perform? Do we need to make a tweak? Do we need to tweak this? Do we have, do we need to add something here? Are people at overcapacity? Do we have them? Because that's another issue that we didn't talk about, right? The other issue that will rear its head is, you have an individual project developer, sales consultant, and they'll sell a bunch of projects all at once. And so this team will have a heavy backlog when this team has a lighter backlog. And the tendency will be like, let's redistribute that backlog so that we make sure the customer experience is high. And sometimes we've done that. I won't say that we haven't done that, but it's got to be very carefully thought through, how you're doing that. And that sort of stuff does lead to us tweaking the model, right? Like, why did this happen in this individual case? Like, what's going on here that led this team to be in a sort of unbalanced situation with the other team? Organizationally, the leadership is highly focused on is project success. And so when we're seeing deviations from that project success, and we're seeing, kind of across the organization, when we're looking at what's happening, that's when we kind of jump in and say, okay, is this a model thing? Is this an organizational thing? Is this a process thing? Is this a person thing? So I think
sounds like it never stops, right? It's you just constantly looking at the numbers and the performance and the feedback, and there's not a time to rest. Dave, any additional perspectives to add?
I mean, the last thing I would say that just comes to mind, high level, is like, it's just more enjoyable to operate, I think, for us as owners, and it makes us feel good that we can pass some of the ownership to the teams, create more opportunity. I mean, smooth out, if you will, the performance and the results. You're dealing with other issues, but you're not dealing with some of the issues you get in a functional organization, which are, I've been there, and Paul has too, where it's just, you have some days, you're like, again, so it's a lot about like, what do you want to do, and what do you want to kind of wake up doing every day? I think we feel not only good about this, but like it's enjoyable to work in it's not without its challenges, but it's enjoyable to work if you feel good about coming and nurturing this model. I mean, and that's I don't think that can be overlooked.
right? Nothing's perfect, but it sounds like you guys get enough positive feedback from your people, from your customers, that you're getting signals that this is a model that's working and making folks happy and fulfilled, which is great to hear.
So this, just a review that came in yesterday that sort of illustrates the power of the team. It says there's more to it, but I'll just read the back half. It says, right from the start, the whole process was super informative. Everything went as planned. They went above and beyond, finishing the project in record time. We're absolutely thrilled with the results and can't wait to celebrate Thanksgiving and the holidays with our family and friends in our beautiful new kitchen. This is a kitchen addition project, but they named each and every individual person on the team. It was a pleasure working with such a professional and talented team, and when the customer recognizes that it's a team and they call out every single individual person on the team, from project developer, project manager to senior project manager to architect, designer, design assistant, everybody on the team, you've made, a significant impact from that standpoint. They see it as
a great impression. This has been a terrific conversation. You guys have been fantastic. I think this is really going to get people thinking about, again, I said at the beginning, hitting the reset button. Maybe it's not always a complete reset. We talked about it's a bit more of a constant iteration, but being open to making change, being open to recognizing when things are working, and that your initial solution may not be the one that you land on, but that you've got to keep moving and got to keep changing is super important. So thank you so much for sharing your experience and your insights.
Thank you.
Happy to.
This series is brought to you by House Pro. To learn more about our best-in-class software for winning clients, managing projects, and simplifying your workflow, visit house.com/pro.